He is the author of The Baby Bombers, The Inside Story of the Next Yankees Dynasty, and the co-author of Mission 27, A New Boss, A New Ballpark, and One Last Ring for the Yankees, Core 4. Covers the Yankees for MLB.com. Bryan Hoch is joining me now. Bryan, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Michael. Happy to be here.
Great. So, this is obviously really strange times, and it's not easy to find a job if you're, just coming into the workforce. Sports journalism, a lot of really great people have been laid off from, organizations in baseball. MLB Network has been hit. ESPN was hit very hard. So it's obviously a really hard economy in sports journalism. But I want to kind of take you back to when you first started to get into journalism and where you are now. What advice would you give to a younger Bryan Hoch that you now know, but would have wanted to know when you were 20 years old?
Wow. Well, I think that the job market, like the job has just changed so drastically from where I was when I was 20 years old. When I was 20 years old, that would have been 2004. So yeah, we've changed a lot since then. I mean, social media became such a big part of what we do. We used to live on a 24-hour news cycle, and that's not even a thing anymore. Like, you're not even hour to hour, you're minute to minute, second to second. Like, it's always a race to get news and information out there. And to be honest, I don't see that changing. I don't think that we're going to ever take a step back and say, all right, we're going to go back to the way it was when newspapers were like, the dominant force. And so I would say, I guess my advice would be to continue to be adaptable, to embrace new challenges, because with everything that comes, and we've seen it already with Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and whatever else people are doing, TikTok, like there's so many new things coming. There will be more new things. And I think when you stop growing, when you stop adapting, when you say like, all right, I'm good, I'm just going to do what I've been doing all along and forget this new stuff, that's when you get left behind. And it doesn't happen overnight, but little by little, I think you become a little bit of a dinosaur, and I think you get left behind. And you're not in danger of that at 20, but I'm talking more about, at my age, I'm 38. And so, you've seen that I've tried to kind of grow and adapt, and, doing Instagram stories wasn't part of the job 10 years ago, but I feel like it's an important way to connect now with people. And, there's so many different avenues. And I guess one thing that just came to my mind is that just because somebody read your story on, in my case, MLB.com, or read my tweet on Twitter, doesn't mean that they follow me on those platforms. I found that there are so many different kind of segments of people. Some people don't read. Some people only look at Instagram. Some people will only read tweets. The people who read tweets don't necessarily see your Instagram. So even though I feel like a lot of times I'm saying the same thing over and over, I have to remind myself that I'm reaching a different audience every time I say it. So I don't know if that answered your question, but those were kind of some of the things that came to my mind.
No, it's great. And, we went back to, what you know now versus what you knew then. But I do want to ask, what was something that you learned back then that is still used today and that's used most to benefit yourself in your career?
Well, I think that the first thing I would say is that being able to interview people is the most valuable thing that you can do here. Is you could be the best writer in the world, but if you don't have the information, you're not going to get very far. And so I feel like if I was going to start a dream team of newspaper or web writers, I want reporters. I want people who can speak to people, who can get the story, who are not afraid to ask tough questions, because that's how you're going to get the quality content and the information that is out there. And so when I started out, I was very raw and green, and I'm sure some of the interviews were not very good. And but the only way you're going to get better at it is to do it more, and that's by speaking to sources, whether they're ball players, whether they're front office people. I mean, if you're in a politics beat, you're going to be talking to the mayor and his assistants, or whatever kind of line of work you're in. I feel like the ability to start a conversation with somebody and keep it going, that's so valuable, because that really is kind of the lifeblood of what we do, is to talk to people and get information and kind of pull at those strings to get those stories. And so, I feel like, there's so much information out there, but if you're able to kind of create new information or get stuff that other people can't get, that really is going to set you apart.
Yeah, I've been told, I've been doing this for 6 months now. And one of the biggest critiques that I've gotten from people is that, it's too much of a Q&A and make it more like a conversation. So I kind of get what you're referring to there, as far as, making it a conversation and not just, it's like not like a formal interview every time.
That is definitely something that I feel is valuable, because I remember, like, when I was first in a clubhouse, like, I would come in. And I remember, let's say, for example, I started out covering the Mets. So let's say I knew I was going to talk to Mike Piazza that day. I would literally sit down in front of the computer and print out 10 questions for Mike Piazza. And then you stand there at his locker with them and you read question 1, question 2. The problem with that is, and you get a decent interview depending on the source. The problem with that is you leave yourself no room for follow-up questions. And so I feel like the listening is just as important as asking the question, because let's say you ask somebody a question and he says, yeah, and he answers the question, then he'll say something interesting about his family, maybe, and that's why my dad, was an airplane pilot as a kid. And then it's like, okay, question 2, but that was begging for a follow-up. Wait, he was an airplane pilot? You must have some interesting stories about that. Or so I feel like listening and being able to respond, it's great to go into an interview with some ideas of what you want to ask, but I wouldn't want to stick to a script, which is what I think a lot of younger reporters did. That's what I did. Here are 5 things I want to ask this player about, but you don't kind of get the whole story because you're not really listening to the answer.
Yeah, and you mentioned interesting stories about like Mike Piazza's family, for example. You have a family member, your junior beat reporter, Penny. Her baseball show, I loved it. I watched them all throughout the season. I have one pulled up now from September. So she's really into it. Like she's just all in on the Yankees. She knows she's like all in, and she does the show every week. Like, when did that start? And what is she like watching the Yankees?
Yeah, it's my daughter, Penny. She's 4 years old, and she loves being on camera. The problem with her is she's very shy and doesn't want to be on camera and doesn't have the personality. No, I'm joking. She's very outgoing, and I think that's one of the cool things about this year, which has been so hard and difficult, I think, in so many aspects. This was a year where she really got interested in what daddy does and where does daddy, and it helped that I was home a lot more and we could watch the games together, because I wound up not traveling this year. Usually I go to most, if not all, of the road games, but this year they had us cover from home because of the pandemic. So it was just a strange year, but hopefully that gave some people some smiles here and there. And she likes to come on the camera and talk to people, and it was fun. It was a fun way. And what I'm saying is, like, it's just another way to connect with fans. And whether it's me or my daughter, my wife obviously is the brains behind that operation. But we've tried to make it entertaining and fun for people to follow the Yankees and to talk some Yankee baseball, especially this year when there was so much that was not fun. So hopefully that made some people laugh and smile a little bit.
I want to talk about your books now. Like I mentioned in the open, co-author of Mission 27, the author of The Baby Bombers, and then you just sent another book to your publisher called The Bronx Zoom, which you said will be coming out in the summer of 2021. Just kind of tell me about what was behind those books and what was the message that you were trying to tell, or the story that you were trying to tell with those books, and now the other story with Bronx Zoom coming out in a few months.
Yeah, they're all very different books, and like For me, it was an abstract idea. It was like, yeah, I would like to write a book someday, but I never had like a clear goal in mind. And then you got to go back to 2017 when the Yankees really weren't expected to do a whole lot. A lot of people were saying, oh, they might miss the playoffs. They've got all these young kids coming up. And Aaron Judge comes out of nowhere, not out of nowhere. We knew about him, but we didn't know he was going to hit 52 home runs and be the American League Rookie of the Year and win the home run derby and all that. Like nobody really saw that coming. He had this fantastic rookie year, and it happened at the same time that Gary Sanchez was having a big year behind the plate. Luis Severino was having a big year on the mound. Greg Bird was a big part of the team at first base. So had this whole group of baby bombers all coming together, and right on the heels of the Derek Jeter era, where the Yankees had said goodbye to Jeter and to Mariano Rivera and to Alex Rodriguez. Like you had these big, bold-faced names going out the door. Meanwhile, you've got these young kids coming in. And, a publisher approached me probably around the time that Judge won the home run derby in July of that year and said, hey, we'd like to do an Aaron Judge book. And I kind of looked into it a little bit and did a little of the preliminary research. And I said, I can do a Judge book, but I feel like there's a bigger story here that I want to tell. And it's a transition from the Derek Jeter Yankees to the Aaron Judge Yankees, and having been in the clubhouse for the whole thing. And I could really kind of dig into that and get behind the scenes with people. And I thought that was much more interesting than focusing on one player. And so that's what I wanted to do, is really, how does an organization that had so much winning, so much of their legacy was Derek Jeter, to kind of shift that to new faces is what I wanted to explore there. Who were the people behind the scenes who made those decisions? How did that happen? How did you get guys like Didi Gregorius, a shortstop, to take over for Derek? So there was a whole lot, and that was a fun Yankee team anyway to be around. I think we can argue that they probably should have gone further had we known what the Houston Astros were doing at the time. And didn't know that at the time. And as for Mission 27, a couple of years after that first book came out, I wanted to do something else. And Mark Feinstein and I, we worked together at MLB.com. We were both on the beat that year in 2009. And the 10-year anniversary was coming up. And we kind of talked about the idea of what could we do together. And we kept coming back to 2009, because if you go think about that year, there was so much going on. The closing of the old stadium, the move across the street to the new one. They go out and sign big name free agents in CC Sabathia, AJ Burnett, Mark Teixeira. They make a trade for Nick Swisher. There were so many personalities on that team. And we said that, the thing about that time was, and you think about the Jay-Z and Alicia Keys song and everything that was happening that year, they win the World Series on November 4, and you kind of thought at the moment, like, okay, well, that's what they were supposed to do, and clearly they'll win again next year or the year after that or the year after that. And now you look back 10 years later, and it's like, wait, that was the only one. That was the only time they won, and they never made it back to it since. Never made it back to the World Series after that. It was the last time that Derek Jeter and Mariano Rivera and Andy Pettitte and Jorge Posada, they all got World Series rings. It was the only time that guys like Teixeira and A-Rod did. After that year, they kind of tore it down, and Johnny Damon was gone. Hideki Matsui was gone. It was like, wait, that was a really special year, and I don't think we fully appreciated it in the moment because we just expected that there would be more to come. And so getting to go back with those guys 9 or 10 years later and to catch up with them and chasing down. I mean, CeCe and Brett Gardner were still on the team, but kind of tracking down Johnny Damon and AJ Burnett and getting the gang all back together. We wound up going out to Connecticut and sitting in Mark Teixeira's office. And there was the craziest thing that happened was A-Rod were riding around Midtown in his limo together with him, just asking about 2009, because he was on his way to 30 Rock because Jennifer Lopez was going to be on SNL that week. And it's just like crazy stuff, getting to kind of walk into their world a little bit. And like I said, it was almost like being at your high school reunion and catching up with guys that you hadn't seen in a while. And so that was a whole lot of fun. It was a fun year because that was the greatest moment of a lot of these guys' lives, when you talk to a Phil Hughes or a Jabba Chamberlain or, any of those guys who were on that team, they were so happy to go back into 2009 and talk about it again. And so those are the first two books. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little long-winded here.
No worries.
And now the most recent book is going to be The Bronx Zoom. That's going to come out in June of 2021. And that really is just kind of a look back into this crazy year that we've just all lived, and using the Yankees to kind of tell the stories of what happens when a pandemic shuts down Major League Baseball and shuts down the world. And there were so many different storylines that we covered at the time, but I feel like everything was moving so fast in a lot of ways. Like there was so much uncertainty. We didn't know if baseball was even going to play a game. Then it was the coronavirus and shutting things down. And we didn't know if we could go back to New York City. And New York City was the kind of hub of the pandemic. And then Black Lives Matter. And there's a presidential race. And everything was just kind of, there was a lot. Brian Cashman says all the time, it was like drinking from a fire hose. And every day felt like it was 48 hours long. And so to kind of go back with guys now and kind of, I let them have a little time to cool off and kind of chill, and then to now go back and say, wait a second, like, so you guys sat in Philadelphia for 4 days and didn't know where you were going to go or who you were going to play, and like
right.
There were so many stops and starts of this weird season, and I know it didn't end with a World Series championship, but I feel like we're going to look back 5-10 years from now and be like, that was crazy. Like
Right.
Even that they were able to play that season, the 60-game season. So it's kind of a snapshot of that. And, we put in a lot of time and work onto it. And it's not done yet. So still in the editing process, but it'll be out next summer.
I look forward to checking it out. I often find myself looking back to March when this whole thing started, and
me too.
You were hearing rumblings about it, January and February, and you're thinking, oh, this is just going to blow over, we'll be fine. And then you look back, the day I remember, I believe it was like March 10th or 11th, and the NBA cancels, they shut down their season. And then, the next day MLB shuts down spring training. And then the next day, the entire country is essentially shut down. And you just look back at, okay, we'll be back, middle of April, we'll be fine. Okay, maybe middle of May. Okay, maybe June. And then here we are, December 21st. And, we're still in the middle of it. Hopefully, we're coming around the final leg of the race here with a vaccine. So hopefully.
Yeah, one thing about that is, I was with the team obviously in spring training when it shut down, and the Yankees had gone across the state. They were going to play 2 games over in West Palm Beach and Jupiter, and so the day after the NBA shut down, you're talking about Rudy Gobert and all that happened.
Yeah.
They're on the field. They're playing the Nationals, and Kyle Higashioka told me this. He was behind the plate. He's catching, I think it was. It doesn't matter who's catching. It doesn't. I was Loizaga. Jonathan Loizaga was pitching that day. But Angel Hernandez was behind the plate, the umpire, and he leans over and he kind of puts his hand on his back and he says, "They're about to shut this whole thing down. See you in June." And like Higashioka's behind the plate, and he's kind of like, "No way! Like no way!" And it turns out June would have been great. Like we didn't wind up playing again until July 23rd. So. Just a crazy year. But at the time, June sounded so ridiculous. You figured maybe this will shut down for a week or two and we'll be back in April and like we'll get the season going. It'll be normal. And nothing about 2020 was normal.
Yeah, for sure. Going back to the book, and you talked about the transition from the old Yankee Stadium to the new Yankee Stadium. And one of the things a lot of people, I never went to the old Yankee Stadium. I've been to the new one, but one of the first things I hear when you ask people that have been there is the crowd and how the crowd was on top of you. And you hear a lot of players that played in that stadium say the crowd was unbelievable. And for me, at least, watching the Yankees in the new stadium and watching the film of the old games in the old stadium, I think the one that probably is the most recognizable is Game 7 in 2003 against the Red Sox when Boone hits the home run. The Yankees make the comeback. And they say, oh, the crowd's different. They're not that into it. They're not on top of you like you were at the old Yankee Stadium. And then when Didi Gregorius hits that game-tying home run in the 2017 wildcard game, you hear Joe Girardi say that was the first time you've heard the crowd like that in the new Yankee Stadium. What was the biggest difference that you've noticed? You've covered games in both stadiums. What's the biggest difference that you've noticed between the old and new Yankee Stadium? There's a lot of similarities. Obviously, Monument Park transitioned over But what's the biggest difference in your mind in covering games at both stadiums?
I think the difference is that, I mean, you talk about the fans being on top of you. If you go look at the pictures of where the upper deck is at the old stadium, it literally hovers over the playing field. So if you're standing in right field and you look up, right field is on top of you. Now you can't build ballparks that way anymore. The coding doesn't allow you to do it. So
Right.
the current stadium is more set back, and I think that's why it doesn't feel as intimidating. We talked to people from 2009. You know, I remember Terry Francona was managing the Red Sox, and we talked to him for the book, and he said it just didn't feel the same. It wasn't as intimidating. And when you come in, and I think a lot of it was that, a lot of it was that they had trouble with attendance that first year, especially down near the field where the seats were priced too high. But just in terms of the structure, I think the noise doesn't stay in there. Plus, you have fewer people in the ballpark than you did. I think the original Yankee Stadium, I mean, forget all the way back in like the Babe Ruth days, but like when it closed, I think it had 57,000. Like you could have that many people in there in 2008. And then correct me if I'm wrong, I think the current one is probably around 48, maybe it's 50, something like that, maybe 52 yeah, for a playoff game. But anyway, it's less people are in Yankee Stadium now than it would have been in 2008. But I think the biggest part is that structure where if you ever went to the upper deck at the old stadium, and I know you said you hadn't, but if you did, and you walk up that ramp, like the stairs were steep. It was really steep. And you'd like look back down and get vertigo looking at the playing field. It'd be like, whoa, I feel like I'm going to fall out of this thing. It did not feel totally safe to be in the upper deck at the old stadium. The new one doesn't have that problem, but I think you lose a little bit of that intimidation factor. But you're right in that 2017 kind of showed us that Yankee Stadium could get loud, and it was really loud. I remember Girardi talking about that, and you look into the stands and you see guys going nuts and throwing their beers in the air and stuff, and it was a party, and that was probably, you know, he's right about that. It was one of the few times that it felt like the old stadium. I think that if we go back to 2009, it didn't really quite feel that way for some reason, but by 2017, maybe it was the fact that the Yankees hadn't been in the postseason for a while. They missed a couple of years there, but yeah, 2017 felt special. And I think that anybody who was in the ballpark could kind of sense that. It was a real celebratory atmosphere. And like I said, that team should have done more. And I'm going to blame the Houston Astros for that.
Well, I'm going to get into that because, you know, when we were, you know, when you're watching, the 2017 team was, you know, the most fun Yankee team I've watched. And, you know, I thought that they were going to go to the World Series. And, you know, there's obviously the Astros cheating scandal and, you know, what we knew when Mike Fiers goes on the record last November.
Doesn't that feel like it was 100 years ago, by the way?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it feels like, I mean, think about it. The punishment comes down in January and, you know, now we're in December and it feels like, wow, that was only January of this year. Anything pre-March, I feel like was like last year or like 5 years
I was
ago.
just watching the 1 year anniversary of Garrett Cole's press conference just popped up. And I was like,
Yeah.
1 year? How was that a year ago? Like that literally feels like it was 4 or 5 years ago. So yeah, I don't know.
Time is crazy nowadays. But I do want to ask because there were like some sort of like small talk of, you know, the Astros and, you know, there were accusations that they were using like a flashing light in the outfield. There were whistling allegations, and that actually carried over to the 2019 season. Was there any sense, you know, I assume, you know, media personnel in Houston as well and all across the country, but was there any talk that there was actually something up and these weren't just kind of baseless allegations, you know, of teams that may have been jealous of how successful the Astros were?
The first time I heard it, the Yankees were in Oakland, and they were in Oakland, and I was talking to somebody in the press box, and they said to me that Astros team is dirty as hell. And I mean, but we didn't know what was going on. But yeah, I remember hearing it during a trip to Oakland, and somebody was telling me about it, and then I asked a couple of players about it, and they said, yeah, that's what we heard too. But nobody had the smoking gun. And until Mike Fiers stepped up and said it, you know, Brian Cashman has talked about the Yankees complained numerous times to MLB about something weird was going on in Houston. But, you know, MLB probably asked about it and we're told, no, we're not doing anything strange. And then they moved on. Like without Mike Fiers stepping up, we probably still wouldn't know right now. it was definitely kind of a whispered, I don't want to say an open secret because that's not right. We didn't know the method that they were using, but people knew that something strange was going on in Houston. They couldn't place it because, whatever they were doing with the banging of the garbage cans and the video feed, nobody who was not a Houston Astro could go into those areas and see it. So it was probably inevitable that somebody would leave that team, as Mike Fiers did, and then kind of say it. But in that moment, when everybody was still on that Astros team, and as far as I know, Mike Fiers hasn't given back his World Series ring. They were all benefiting from that to some extent. So as long as they were getting that Houston Astros paycheck and winning games and going to the World Series, nobody was going to blow the whistle in that moment. So we heard whispers about it, but nobody knew exactly what was going on.
Do you think that they were continuing their methods in 2019? Obviously Altuve hits the walk-off off Chapman and says, "Don't pull off my jersey." That's not normal behavior. Do you think?
Yeah, it was strange.
Do you think that carried over? They say they didn't do it. MLB says they didn't do it. Who knows how far they even looked into 2019? Do you think that there was something going on in 2019 as well?
Well, I'll tell you what Gleyber Torres told me is that he cheats at video games. He'll look at Luis Severino's controller. And this is actually in the new book. I put that in there. And they cheat in the clubhouse looking at video games. And he says, "I'm winning. Why would I stop?" And so, if you're continuing to win and it's helping you win games, why would you stop? So maybe you find a new way to do it. Gary Sanchez had a great quote in spring training about, hey, if I hit a home run to send my team to the World Series, they can rip off anything. They can rip off my pants. I don't care. I don't know. I mean, the answer is we'll probably never know for sure, but everything I think that comes out of Houston the last couple of years, I think you have to view it with a grain of salt and some suspicion. And, I do wish that we hadn't had the pandemic for about a million reasons, but one of them is that we were robbed, I think, of seeing how fans would have treated the Astros on the road this year. I think that would have been a lot of fun because we were already seeing it in spring training, in front of 8,000 people, they were getting booed loud. Spring training games are usually kind of relaxed. Everybody's there to just drink a beer and have, get some sun, get a tan on. And people were showing up to really hate on the Astros. And I wish we could have had 45,000 people at Yankee Stadium for the Astros. That would have been fun.
I let's pray that happens in 2021. We have full stadiums, and we'll see if that tension carries over. I do want to ask you, I know that you alluded to it in the Bronx Zoom, but I guess what were some of the main difficulties of covering baseball this past season? Obviously everything, you're doing Zoom press conferences and you're not at the road games. What were kind of the restrictions that you had to fall into during the 2020 season?
Yeah, there was so much. To start with, I never even heard of Zoom before March. I never heard of it. Didn't even know this was a thing that we could do. And so, I had FaceTime, but I didn't know that Zoom was a thing. I never had a reason to. So I think there was a learning curve with that. You just lack the face-to-face interaction. You and I are having a conversation right now, and this is good. But when you put it in a group setting, and it's kind of an interview room thing, and there's a moderator, and you have to click raise your hand to ask a question. If I'm in there with Aaron Boone or Aaron Judge or whoever it is, I can ask a question, but a lot of times you don't get the follow up, and you're always aware that there are other people listening in on the conversation. So they're probably a little guarded and uncomfortable, and I'm probably a little guarded. I don't want to sound stupid. I don't want to ask a dumb question. But if we're in the clubhouse and I'm with Judge or somebody and we're just having a one-on-one conversation, there's kind of that more relaxed situation where, not everybody is recording this. We can go off the record and I can say, okay, but really, don't print this, but I'll tell you what it really is. You don't have that option in a Zoom call. You can't do it. And so everything is a formal interview setting. And while it was better than nothing, I think you lack a lot of what happened this year because we weren't able to go and have those conversations in private where everything is, kind of broadcast, and whether it's, being sent to everybody. And in a lot of cases, it was live on the internet. And so everybody was watching it. There was no kind of private moment in kind of a weird year where we had nothing to do but be private and be alone. So everything was just strange this year. Not traveling with the team was hard. I'm so accustomed to, I feel like you miss a lot when you're not there. And even in this strange year where you couldn't go into the clubhouse and talk face to face with somebody, I felt like I was covering the games better at Yankee Stadium than I did off the TV feed at home, because you can, when you're covering a game off TV, you're limited to what the TV will show you. But in the ballpark, you can hear things, you can see things. I can look up and see that the outfield, there's 4 men in the outfield, which happened a couple times, and the TV didn't catch that. And so, but you can also hear what's coming out of the dugouts and you can see things with your own eyes that a lot of times you just miss on the TV broadcast. And so there is value, I think, in being present on the scene. I understand why it couldn't happen for a lot of reasons, but the sooner we can put this behind us, I don't think anybody's going to be nostalgic for 2020 and want to go back to doing it the 2020 way, because it was a challenge in a lot of different ways. I feel like in a lot of ways we were playing for the tie. I guess I would say you knew you weren't going to do your A+ work this way. You were just trying to keep up and keep your head above water, but everything was a little bit watered down. And I think what I love doing is going to the ballpark and talking to people around the game. And Susan Waldman had a great line, the Yankees broadcaster, and she said that baseball season is kind of like a summer camp in reverse. You go for 9 months of the year, you're at the ballpark, hanging out with your friends, talking to them and chatting, and then you go away for 3 months, and then you come back and do it again. And so I like that. I thought that was true in a lot of ways. And I just feel like the quality of the coverage and the games, really, it lacked the interaction, but I think most of all, it lacked the energy of having the fans there. We really missed that. And that was bizarre, being in a ballpark where there was nobody there. And I'm not hungry to do that again.
Yeah. I mean, the only games I saw fans were the NLCS and the World Series. And even, right. I mean, they had 11,000 at that new stadium in Arlington.
And I heard it sounded like 50,000 after a year of zero. Yeah.
I mean, that's what I was thinking, just watching it on TV. I mean, it feels like a sellout crowd, and I just can't wait till even spring training, when there's going to hopefully be, maybe a couple thousand. I don't know. Hopefully that'll happen. But, once we get fans back in the stands, it's going to sound like 100,000, not 45,000.
I covered a lot of Met games back in my career where it was like 9,000 people at Shea Stadium, and you would look out and be like, this is pathetic. Like, what a terrible crowd. And now, if you could have 9,000, I would sign up for that for opening day. Sounds good to me. I'll take it.
Oh, yeah. My dad always talks about going to Candlestick. I don't know if you've ever been there or covered.
No, I never made it to Candlestick. No, it was gone by the time I came on. Yeah.
Yeah, so he would always go to games at Candlestick, and it would be so cold, and there would be 2,000 people there, and if the Mets were in town, 1,000 of those fans would be Mets fans. So it's normal nowadays, it seems like, but it wasn't normal back then. I do want to talk some Yankees now, because the Yankees are a real baseball team. We're not just talking about fantasy land. Yes, I know. They lose to the Rays in 5 in the division series, and you read Yankees Twitter, and everyone says Game 2, taking out Garcia and putting in Happ, and that decision, and kind of trying to play the Rays game a little bit against the Rays. At the time, I thought, hey, it's unique, it's interesting. Let's see if it works. Obviously, it didn't. What was the reaction kind of like within the press corps, and what were some of the conversations you had when that happened? The Yankees obviously go on to lose that game, but what was your reaction to that move, and how that kind of effectively changed the series?
Did not make sense to me in the moment. Still does not really make sense to me now, 3 months later? I remember watching Happ start to warm up out there in the bullpen and thinking, like, what is this, his throw day or something? Like, that's weird. And then Garcia did not have a great first inning. He was a little shaky. I think it was 27 pitches, but man, I agree with CC Sabathia, who said about that situation, there is no other scenario where you would want to put a 21-year-old rookie in to show what he can do than a neutral site, empty ballpark playoff game. Like, you're lacking so much of the what would make that a scary assignment, I think, where I really would have liked to have seen Davey go back out there and I mean, maybe he doesn't go 5 innings, but at least go another inning or two. I just didn't get the whole opener thing. And I know, I mean, you know, in researching the Bronx Zoom, I talked to pretty much everybody in the front office about that game, and we went back and kind of relived it in a lot of ways. And you know, they could cite chapter and verse, the numbers, why this made sense and why they were able to. And this was not something they decided the day of. You know, they went in once they had won the Cleveland series was when the clock started on this, and they had decided before they left Cleveland that they were going to do this in Game 2 for a lot of reasons, but mostly to kind of reduce the number of left-handers in the Tampa Bay lineup. And that all worked. I mean, yeah, Kevin Cash put out a lineup with 5 right-handed batters and 4 lefties, I think. And it puts Happ in a situation where he could succeed, but now we look back, he didn't succeed. And so I can't put it all on Jay Happ, the fact that it didn't work out. Like, sure, it would have been great if he pitched lights out and would have made people look very smart, but remember, this is a guy who was already complaining about how little he was being used, and he was not happy with his workload. And now you're going to throw him in to be the second inning pitcher, something that he hadn't really done all year. He didn't come out of the bullpen all year. Just there were so many kind of moving parts there. And I think that you can try to be too smart in some situations and try to outraise the Rays, as you said. And I think that in a lot of ways they were trying to prove how much smarter they were than Tampa Bay, and it came back to burn them. And so, look, there's no guarantee if you start Masahiro Tanaka in Game 2. Remember, he came out in Game 3 and he got lit up and he got hit hard. So maybe that happens in Game 2 and you're down 1-1. It's tied 1-1 anyway. But the fact that you gamble and it didn't work out, it just looks bad. And I think especially after Game 1, they won so convincingly. Mm-hmm. You can point to Game 2 and say that's where the momentum shifted. And I think that a lot of guys still haven't gotten over that yet. I think that was a real turning point in that series.
Another big liability for the Yankees. I had trouble figuring out the word. A big liability this year was Gary Sanchez. He only started 2 of the 7 playoff games, and he hit 147, 64 strikeouts, and 178 plate appearances.
Not great.
Not great. The Yankees like him a lot, obviously. They tendered him a contract. There was some wishful thinking from a few Yankee fans that they wouldn't, but it was pretty clear that they would all along. What have you seen as the main problem with Gary Sanchez? And, you know, what was kind of the overwhelming thought between members of the Yankees and the front office and the coaching staff? Because they've been over the top with their praise for Gary Sanchez, and he's going to be a great player. He's going to be our catcher for a long time. What have you seen as far as why he had such a bad 2020 season and really did not have a great end to the 2019 season also?
No, he has been a great player, but he wasn't a great player in 2020. I mean, we're talking about the fastest player in American League history to 100 home runs. Like he didn't do that by accident. I think that the problem with 2020 is, and I'll go back to spring training with this, I think they overloaded him with too much stuff. I think they brought in Tanner Swanson as the new catching coach. They really focused on this one knee down thing. And then that all got interrupted. And, who knows what would have happened if opening day had been April 1st, as it was supposed to be. Maybe Gary would have had a regular year. But the fact of the matter is he really, I think it got in his head when he came back, and you step in the batter's box and you look up and you're hitting under 200 on the scoreboard. I think that really bothered him, and he started to press. He knew he was running out of time. There were so many times. He also had some bad luck. I will give him that. I'm thinking specifically there was a ball he hit in Buffalo to left center field that would have been a grand slam and just died on the warning track. And there were so many of those, but I can't put all of that on bad luck because, as you mentioned, the strikeout numbers too. He had trouble catching up to high fastballs. That was a real problem for him. I think that he was not happy to lose the Garrett Cole catching duties. There was just a whole lot of things going on, and he struggled again with the pass balls. The pitch framing was better. That improved a little bit, but at what price? And so what I need to see is a full year from Gary Sanchez, because that 2020, I'm willing to write it off as just like, okay, that was a bad year, because it was really, really bad for Gary to hit 147 with 10 homers. And I think I looked this up. It's the lowest batting average of any player in Major League history to have 10 or more home runs in a season. And it's not even close. So just a bizarre year all around for Gary, but he'll come into camp. Cashman said he'll be the heir apparent to himself, I guess. But anyway, he'll probably have a leg up on the catching job, and if not, Kyle Higashioka can step in. We've seen enough from Higashioka that there's a little pop in that bat. He impressed me, that 3 home run game. That was I think that given more playing time, he's a better player than some people are giving him credit for. But look, the Yankees, if they can get Gary Sanchez back to 2017 Gary, I mean, he's been an all-star. That none of that happened by accident. I think that Gary gets a bad rap in a lot of ways, but it's hard to give him too much slack when you look at 2020 and just say that was a really bad year. And so he needs to shake that off and come back and prove. And it sounds like down in the Winter League, he's crushing it down there. So he's doing the things he needs to do. But hopefully he can come back and have a more normal, uninterrupted year.
Yeah, and one thing that another thing that I want to ask about the Yankees is that over the past few years we've seen them really struggle with injuries, and this year was no different. It frustrates. I'm sure it frustrates a lot of Yankee fans. It frustrates me. 3 years in a row they've had massive injuries to almost pretty much all of their big name players. The Yankees replaced the training staff, I believe, before this season. Is there something up? Like, is it the players? Was it the way that they were training in the off season? Some say, do they train so much that they kind of overwork themselves? I mean, or do the Yankees just have every single injury-prone player in baseball? I mean, it's just very odd the way the last few years have gone on with Judge and Hicks and Urshela and all these guys getting hurt every single year.
I've been very practiced, I guess, on writing injury updates, and so that is one thing I think I can do in my sleep right now. As far as the Eric Cressey thing goes, I'm willing to give them this year because they only got that started in January or February, and then everything shut down in March, and so that was really very interrupted. They weren't able to kind of get that going, and I think what you saw with the stop-start of this year, you saw it league-wide, but specifically for a guy like Tommy Kahnle, where you shut it down, you go home, he's sitting playing video games in Albany, then all of a sudden it's, all right, let's go, 3.5 week summer camp, go. And he blew out. His first appearance, he threw 1 inning and he was done, and that was it. That doesn't answer your question about guys like Stanton and Judge. Judge was dealing with a lot of things, the calf injury this year, where he came back and begged them to not put him on the IL, and then came back and played 6 innings, and then went right back to the IL. And I think that they've had a lot of headaches with that, but if they could start fresh and get going, I think in a lot of ways they were dealing with still the hangover from 2019 in a case like Judge, in a case like Severino. Those guys were still, Paxton was battling an injury from 2019 that carried over into the winter of 2020. So I guess the best thing they could do is, I don't think they had any significant, with the exception of Urshela, there's nothing that should linger into next year. And Urshela, I think they said 3 months recovery. So even he could be ready for an opening day. They just need to get a fresh start and see if that training program can kind of pay some dividends. I hate to keep blaming the pandemic for everything, but it certainly didn't help to send guys home in March and then tell them, all right, hurry up, get back to New York in June, go. And then we got to be ready July 23. I think it was just a weird year for every team, but the Yankees came in with a lot of baggage in that department. So clearly it's going to be noticed.
Yeah. And Luis Severino is going to come back, hopefully from Tommy John surgery. They're saying July.
Should get him back
August.
Probably June or July, I guess. Yeah, I think that could be in play.
That could be like almost like a trade deadline acquisition. You hear a lot of teams say that. You get a guy like that. Let's hope he's the same Luis Severino that we saw in 2017 and the first half of 2018. Right. One last question, and then I want to do a couple rapid fire. Okay. After that, there has been rumblings about, should the Yankees move Gleyber Torres to second, even if they re-sign DJ LeMahieu, and then try and re-sign a Didi Gregorius and get him back at shortstop. There's a lot of different ways you can go with it. If they re-sign LeMahieu, people say you can trade Luke Voigt at where his value is at its peak right now. Maybe get back some pitching, maybe get back some young MLB-ready players. There's talk if you don't re-sign LeMahieu, you put Torres at second and go after Gregorius. Where do you see kind of the Yankee infield playing out right now?
I think if I had to bet, I'm going to say they're going to bring back the 2020 infield. I think LeMahieu is a no-brainer for me. You gotta re-sign him, and his value is really at second base. He can play first, he can play third, but I want him up the middle there as that Gold Glove stabilizing presence at second base. And Luke Voigt just led the majors in home runs. I want to see another year of him at first base, and if Gleyber can get in better condition. They said that he came in heavy at the beginning of summer camp. He used a lot of that 60-game season to get right. But if you go look at what he did in the postseason, it's pretty good. The bat was back to where it should be. And so, he really did not have the year we all thought he was going to have. But, defensively, we knew that was going to be a work in progress. He was not going to be Didi Gregorius at short, but you were willing to live with it because he was going to hit 30 home runs and have that kind of production in a full year. We never really saw that Gleyber Torres. Maybe we saw him a little bit at the end, but I like that infield with Urshela at third. I think that covers up for a lot of what Gleyber is lacking at short. I think that you have LeMahieu at second. That covers a lot for Gleyber. Gleyber is going to kind of be a weak link and a work in progress, but that's okay because he's going to make up for that with a bat, and he's going to drive in a ton of runs. And so if their game plan is to bring back the same infield as 2020, I'm actually in favor of that. I think that LeMahieu is the number one priority. He's got to be. And you can't make a case to me that this team is going to be more of a World Series contender if you take away their best player, and regardless of who you bring in. So even if it winds up being a Francisco Lindor at short and you put Gleyber at second, I mean, I guess, sure, but I'd rather just stick with the guy, and DJ is such a big part of that team. And, there's a reason I voted him MVP. So I was the only one who voted him MVP. Unfortunately, I didn't have a lot of company in that, but, I watched him every single day and I knew what a difference he made to that team. And so, I mean, if I'm Brian Cashman, just give him what he wants, right?
Yeah, I am very hesitant to hop on the Francisco Lindor train. Really any big name free agent train, especially with the Yankees' emphasis on trying to stay under the luxury tax and not have to deal with that. All right, I got 3 rapid fires. Maybe the first one may not be so rapid fire because you may have to think about this one. But
okay,
the best game that you've ever covered as a writer for the Mets or the Yankees?
Wow. Best game I ever covered. I'd probably have to say Game 6 of 2009 World Series, just because, I wrote where is it? Here it is. It's back here. Yeah, I wrote a book about it.
Yeah, there it is.
But just the fact that I started the year with that team in February with pitchers and catchers and went everywhere with them, the whole ride. And then, you look up in the 5th or 6th inning, Hideki Matsui is going bananas that series. Mm-hmm. And you just say, wow, the Yankees are going to win the World Series this night. And I'm going to write the game story for it. And kind of that first draft of history to I don't know. I think that they've only won 1 World Series since I came on the beat. So the fact that I was there for it and, then wrote the story and went down in the champagne celebration, I don't know. It's kind of a night that is really special to me for a lot of reasons.
All right. Favorite city to travel to when you're on the road with the team?
Oh man, that's tough. I love Seattle, love San Francisco. I actually really like Boston. Boston, such an easy trip. The history, I love that. Chicago is a great city. Wow, I don't even know how I can answer that. If I have to pick one, I'll say San Francisco. I love going to Oakland is not my favorite ballpark, but because you get to fly to San Francisco and typically stay in downtown San Francisco, and kind of it's just a beautiful city to walk around. It's so picturesque and there's great restaurants. I go San Fran. It was one of those cities I always wanted to go to, and now that I've been able to go there and bike the Golden Gate Bridge and do all that fun stuff, I don't know. That's probably number 1 in my book.
I'm actually from Petaluma, California, which is about an hour north of San Francisco.
Oh
And
yeah,
so
so I don't need to tell you all about the stuff you can do in San Fran. But as an East Coast kid who, didn't even get on an airplane until I was like 25 years old,
mhm.
being able to go to San Fran once a year is definitely a perk.
Yeah, and the Yankees actually play at Oracle Park, and you heard a lot of Yankees people have rave reviews of that ballpark, and no
Love
doubt.
that ballpark. I can smell the garlic fries right now.
Yeah, no kidding, right? All right, final question. You mentioned the restaurants in San Francisco. Is your favorite restaurant there, or is it somewhere else when you go on the road?
I gotta pick just one restaurant
You
to
can
eat
pick
at
as
the rest of my
many.
life.
You can pick as many as you want.
Uh, I do love a restaurant in San Fran called the Slanted Door that's down there by the Bay Bridge. We go there a lot. That's kind of like a Vietnamese type deal. But
Okay.
the one that comes to my mind is Ocean Prime here in Tampa. I know that's a chain, but it's special to me sentimentally. I got engaged there. I proposed to my now wife Connie. So over dinner there, and it was one of our first date spots, and so then to go back and kind of get engaged there, and plus I always get a good steak or lobster or martini or whatever. So that's definitely one of my favorite restaurants to go to. But I'll let me throw one more at you, which you
Yep.
probably wouldn't expect. Like Kansas City, there is a place called Joe's Kansas City that is in a gas station. I think it's actually in Kansas. It's right over the state line. But anyway, it's the best barbecue you'll ever have. And it's in a gas station in Kansas City. And it's like a sit down kind of restaurant, and just ribs, chicken, whatever. And, the best barbecue in the world is in Kansas City. So always a highlight of any trip to play the Royals.
Bryan, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate it. Check out his 2 books, The Baby Bombers, The Inside Story of the New York Yankees Dynasty, and Mission 27, A New Boss, A New Ballpark, and One Last Ring for the Yankees Core 4. And in June, go get the Bronx Zoom. Bryan, thanks so much. Happy holidays. Happy New Year. Thanks so much for coming.
You got it. You too, Michael. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.